So we've been giving you an entire project for you to unzip and set your project and go about. We haven't made our own. So the concept that we're going to be using is that projects are an entire game. Scenes are our different levels. So we'll have different scenes for different props. But these props are all part of one project. So to do that, we need to go right here. We need to go into Maya. We're going to clear this out. And we're going to make a competency 2 project. It's important that we do this, that we set this up, because you're going to build all your objects. And then at the end, when you go to turn in all your props, you're going to bring them all into one scene. We will only open up one scene to grade all your props. We will talk about how you import stuff a little bit later on. But you're also going to apply textures, which means you have to have your textures in a proper ecosystem. So let's go ahead and make that for our competency. So to do that, we're going to go right here, close this out. We're going to go to File. And we're going to go to Project Window. So like I said, so far we've been giving you projects to unzip and use. We now need to make our own. So File, Project Window. From there, we need to tell it New. We have to activate this. So New. Now I'm going to name this Competency 2. Now, we need to pick a location. For me, go right here to Documents, 3F. Now, I'm not going to keep this as part of my lecture 2. This is actually going to be my week 2 competency. So I'm going to just keep it in the week 2 folder. Once I do that, I'm going to hit Accept. And when I do that, if I go right here to my week 2, look what we have here. We have our competency, we have all the folders, and then we have that. That process is the only way that we can make a project. I've had people go through the whole entire process of making that folder, making the individual folders and naming them perfectly, matching up to everything, and it will not work. The reason for that is because only through the project window can you get that workspace mail, that brains. Maya has to create it for us. We cannot make these folders ourselves. We have to do it through the project window. So from there, let's go ahead and get our club. Right here into the prop reference. We want to go into weapons. I think it's actually going to be tools. Yeah, right there, Sokkas Club, even though it is weapon. And then we're going to copy that. That's because we're going to bring this into Maya. But before we do that, we need to make sure that it's in the right part of our project. We do not want to link to this image onto our desktop or into a random folder. That's because Maya will allow us to do that. But if we try to move a project or use it on a different computer, that doesn't come along for the ride. So we have to make sure that we're putting it in the right location. So we're going to go to Documents, 3DF, Week 2, Competency 2, go to Source Images. And Source Images is where we're going to place our reference. That's because these are images that we're going to source into our scene. What's up? So what somebody just said was, if you made a new scene and you decide to make a project, yes, you can make them without them conflicting with each other. It's just that now if you go to save that scene, it's going to save in that new project, because that's a great question that you asked, because when you create a project, it automatically sets your project to that. Now, still get in the habit, if you close down Maya, that when you open it back up, you reset your project each time. just to make sure that it's saving to the right location. But yeah, I could have left the shield up and then created that new project, and it would not close out that shield. But if I want to go save out that shield, it would save it into that new project that I made. What's up? Yeah. So again, I downloaded the reference from 2.5. Since we already did that at the beginning of the lecture, so if you need to find out where that is, it's in 2.5. You have to unzip the reference database. But I'm gonna go right here, paste this into my source images, and let's go ahead and look at it. So that's a pretty crappy reference. So let's go right here and see if we can find something better that can help us model that. So in that case right here, I'm gonna go to search, get rid of that Bowie knife, and it's Bowie knife. That's good enough. All right, so with that, we're done. Sokkas Club. And let's go ahead and see if we can find some better reference. So that's not too bad, even though that is a little bit too small. So we want to make sure that we're matching up to that reference. There it is. There it is in real life. Actually, I like that right there. That's a good start. Let's see if we can find something better. Oh, that one looks best. All right, so with that, I think that's going to be the best one right there. So again, you can peer through, but the idea is that we want to pick something that has a good angle. And this right here, while it's not perfectly on its side, that is enough to kind of figure out what's going on. So from here, I'm going to see if I can grab that without logging into Pinterest, because I really don't have an account. All right, so with that, let's see if I just do this. And save. So we got that right there. So I'm gonna name this Sokkas Club. I should make a Pinterest just so that I can go around this. And also, believe it or not, a lot of artists, a lot of modelers use Pinterest because there's like great links to like anatomy, all that stuff right there. So not saying it's a bad thing to have. I just haven't got around to it. All right. So with that, we're gonna go right here. Go to competency, and I'm gonna save this in my source images and Sokka side. No special characters. I'm gonna hit me. All right, so now I have this club right here, which I'm trying to match up. So, and then we have this one from the side. Now, if I look next to both of them, this may have a little bit more of a dip right there, so I may kind of like split the difference between these two. But for the most part, all these are for the most part lining up. Except for this one is a little bit too thin, so I'll make sure that I add the thickness. And that's what you're trying to do, is get enough information so you can kind of model that key reference. And then you're going to bounce between those two. So first thing that we want to do, now that we create our new project, I want to go right here, and I need to get reference in here so I can model against it. That's where we start talking about something called an image plane. An image plane is just a big plane that they put an image on. And that allows us to have that image inside of Maya. But it's important which camera we do it in. Let's go right here, bring up the grid. And I'm gonna go right here to view, import image, and bring in this club. And this is the problem. So the idea is that I'm gonna try to match up with my image. And if I put in the perspective camera, well, it locks that image to the camera, which means wherever I look, there's that image, which is a problem. That's like me taking that image and gluing it to your face. Does not help. Instead, I need to lock down to one of the cameras. So in this case, I'm gonna go right here, delete that image. What? Oh, I will when I do it the right way. Yeah. That's why you don't want to like, skim through, because like I said, I do stuff purposely to break something and then go back and explain why it happens. And in this case right here, let's go ahead and get rid of our image planes. So delete all by type. To image planes. Now, let's do this the right way. So depending on what we want to model, we may want to pick one camera angle over the other. Now, since this is going to either lay flat or whatever, top view, front view, side view, honestly, it does not matter because we only have one image. Later on, it will be important what angle we put it in, because we will have cases where we will have multiple images from different angles that we need to line up. In this case right here, I'm just going to go ahead inside my top view, go to view, image plane, import image. So in the viewport menu for the view that I want to use, I'm going to go to view, image plane, import image. View, image plane, import image. Next, we want to pick the image that we want to use. And in this case, I want to use this one right here. Now we have that image in here. Problem is that position kind of sucks. So first, we look at this, we have our image going like this. Well, one is a little bit too small. So I'm gonna go right here and scale this up. Now, at this point, we don't have a set scale. What's up? The view panel, it should be that menu that's on the top. Now, if there is no words at the top of your viewport, you may have closed your menu options, which to bring them back, yours may look like this, where there's no menus right there. That gets turned off from time to time. To bring it back, we have to hit Shift M to bring them back. Shift M will close them. Shift M will bring them back. So, like I said, we don't have a set scale. What we're really going to push is making sure that our proportions are correct, because proportions, we can get that from just looking at one singular object. Proportions is making sure each object is sized correctly to itself. Same way if I had like a super long arm, my arm's proportions would be off compared to me. When it comes to scale, once we start bringing everything together, that's where we can figure out scale. Like used to, we would have you model like had the option for you to model a Nintendo controller, one of the original ones. And the problem is that people would model that and have it like the size of a Buick, all right, compared to like a crate or a coffin, stuff like that. That's where the scale would be wrong. Scale will come later when we have opposite objects next to it. Now, go make this big enough to work with. The next thing that we're going to talk about is this right here, this slant. I see way too many people modeling their object exactly like this, and you should never do that. That's because our tools like the axis. They like being on straight lines. They like being aligned to the origins. And if we try to model this at a diagonal look, we're going to lose a lot of functionality on our tools. So if we were trying to do like, like very small details and very fine details on a drawing, do we get into weird like angles with our arms and our body and like contort ourselves? Or do we turn the page? Yeah. So some people will do both, but in this case right here, for the love of God, turn the image. What we're trying to do is just get this to be as straight as possible. Next, right now, it's on the grid, which can be a problem because so does our objects go on the grid. So that right there, it's not going to help us if it just cuts all the way through our object. So we need to get this the heck off the grid. And for that, we just need to push it away from the camera. Now, you're probably asking yourself, well, where is away of the camera? The best way to see that is start moving it up and down and watch the grid over here. If it covers the grid, then we are moving it towards the camera. That's because that right there, that's our top camera, that little square. So what we want to do is push it away from there. Now, the cool thing is that I can push it right there, or I can have it a million miles in the background. It will never change the size of my image because it is set up in the orthographic view. The idea of the orthographic view, there is no depth. Next, with the object selected, this part is optional, but this is really too colorful for me right here to really kind of see my components. So what I like to do is go right here and turn down my alpha gain, 0.4, which makes it a little bit more transparent, a little bit easier to see. Probably 0.5, that's a little bit closer. And then from there, you definitely want to do this, which is with that selected, I'm gonna go right here to create ML layers, create layer from selected. Once it creates that layer, I'm gonna double click on it. I'm gonna name this reference layer. So ref layer. And then I'm gonna set this display mode to reference. The reason for that is because now that I have it in position, when I go to model, I don't want to accidentally constantly click on my reference. So this will lock it down, allow me to work. And at this point, I'm gonna hit save. And then we're gonna go right here, Sokkas Club 001. What's up? With it selected, I went into its channels, and then you will see underneath image plane shape, you will see alpha gain. And then I just changed that down to a number that's lower than 1. 1 is completely on, 0 is completely off. So 0.5 is good enough. All right, so with that there, let's go ahead and look at the different pieces. So if we look at this, we need to start figuring out the primary form and the secondary form. So first, let's start off with primary form. So let's go ahead and start drawing this out. So obviously we have that circle. Then we have the club handle. Again, I'm doing this with a mouse, so I apologize for all the wonkiness. And then we have the actual cloth right here. Now, just from looking at this, we can see that we have 1, 2, 3, at least 3 different pieces. Now, will it be 3 pieces at the end? We may fudge that number a little bit. But for the most part, we can see that we have at least, starting out, 3 different pieces. Now, this is where I'm going to start explaining how I go about modeling stuff, because I'm going to kind of show you different ways that we can get these objects by just starting with 1 piece and building off of it. Now, like I said, you can have the same end result going about it a different way. This is why it's great to kind of talk to other instructors to get an idea about how they go about modeling these objects. But the key part is that realize that I'm going to use this as a way to kind of show you different tools, because I only showed you 3. And sorry, edge loop tool, multi-cut, and extrude. But this is a chance to kind of show you some more. I'll also start highlighting different concepts that we need to be aware of. So with that, I'm gonna go ahead, clear this, and let's start with primary form. So the first thing that I like to do is with an object, I like to pick the first shape that is the most recognizable. Which shape looks the closest to a primitive? The sphere. All right. So Let's go right here. Yeah, exactly, sphere. And then I'm gonna go ahead, bring back my mouse, clear this. I'm gonna create a sphere. And then from there, I'm gonna size this to the size of that sphere. Now, when it comes to this sphere, we want to be careful about how we model off of it. So, spheres are great, except for one spot that can be kind of tricky. And we try to make sure that it's not getting aligned to certain geometry if we're trying to build off of it. And in this case right here, we like nice clean edge rings, nice clean edge loops. What point of our sphere does that go away? Yeah, the very top. Those tops where it turns into all those triangles, that's what we call poles, P-O-L-E-S. Poles can kind of be a pain in the ass. So if we can, we kind of want them away from our object. So this right here, perfectly fine. If there was, if we were modeling this image from a different angle, then our handle would be next to one of the poles. But in this case right here, this is perfectly fine. But we have to be mindful about those poles. Now, next, how do we go about building this? So, this is a little bit harder because we're trying to look at this object and go like, what primary form can we go with that right there? And that's fine. That's a good stage to ask ourselves, hey, is there an object that looks like this that we can start building off of it? But the key part is that when we say object, stop thinking about the entire object as a whole. Instead, what surface can give us, a certain key shape that we need? What is that handle doing to our sphere? It's grabbing it. So it's making an arch around it. So a circle. We kind of already have a circle here. So this is a separate piece, but it doesn't mean that we have to always have it as separate pieces. So let's go ahead and break some rules. You know how I said you should never extrude an edge off of a enclosed surface? Well, don't keep it as part of it anymore. But let's go ahead and get that surface going. So what I did was I selected that edge loop and extruded out that edge. Let me say that again. I held down Shift and extruded out that edge. And here's the cool thing. That's only an issue as long as it's part of this object. So what if I told you that I can just say, all right, I like this shape, become your own object. And that's where I'm going to select all these faces and hold down Shift, right click. And right here, we have extract. Shift, right click, extract. Likewise, the same tool is in Edit Mesh, extract. And now this is its own object. Now it is running into an issue right here that what does it mean when I'm seeing black? It's my normals. That means that they're facing away. What's up? Okay. I am extruding the edges. Yes. So I extruded out the edge, and we'll explain why I did the edges instead of faces in a second. So we have these faces facing the wrong way. So what we want to do, we can go right here to Mesh Display and tell them the reverse. Just flip them the opposite way. What's up? So I selected the faces and then Edit Mesh, extract. You're welcome. All right. Should each object be on its own layer? Later on, when you go to organize your stuff, yes, they're going to be on their own layer, but you don't want each individual objects of the same prop to be on the same on different layers. You're going to have each prop be on their own. From there, I'm going to go right here, hit reverse. And then from there, I'm going to hit 4 on my keyboard. And then I'm going to get rid of the faces that are not covering any part of that blade. So about those. So if we look right there, this is slightly being covered up. So we'll actually move that a little bit later on. But the rest of these faces we don't need. They serve no purpose. So I'm going to hit delete. And now we have that arch going around our object. We built this off of a pre-existing. So instead of making a new object and trying to match the curvature of the sphere, we already had the curvature of the sphere. We just need to make the object. What's up? So to invert them, you select the faces that are facing the wrong way, and then you go to shift, not shift right click, mesh display, and tell them to reverse. Now, but that's it. You definitely don't want to try to just follow along because you'll miss some steps. So with that, you definitely want to ask some questions, which one question you should be asking, why did I extrude out the edges instead of the faces? Right now, there's no thickness to this object. And that is because it's important with this one fact right here. If you can model it with no thickness, you want to do that for as long as possible. I mean, model it flat, give it no thickness, because here's the thing. Realize that thickness is just a detail. Let's say I want to get the thickness. All right, now it has thickness. Well, let's say I want to have a hole here. Well, since it already has thickness, I have to make a hole in the top. I have to make a hole in the bottom. I have to connect them up. But since thickness is a trait that I can add later, I can do whatever detail that I want here. So in this case right here, I'll make that hole. And let's go ahead and kind of do that over and over again. I can make all these cool designs. And then once I'm ready to give it thickness, see what happens? Thickness is always a detail that we can add later. So it's going to be beneficial for us to model the whole entire handle of the club flat and add whatever detail that we want. So that way, when we go and add thickness later on, both sides get it. So in this case, we're just going right here. And since we have the geometry here, I'm just going to start lining this up. Moving that to right there. Going to my vert mode. Probably go right here, moving that. Now I'm going to keep these straight just for next bit. Actually, I'm going to bring that right there. About the same level. So I'm going to actually align this to this right here. So I'm going to go ahead. Actually, that's going to be too many. And I'll explain why, because essentially I'm going to transition these to flowing around the handle. I don't want too many going around that handle. So from here, I'm going to hold down V as Victor on this one right here. And snap it so that way it aligns in that right there. I'm going to do it, same one right there and right there. Next thing I'm going to do is just, I'm going to spread these out a little bit more evenly. Essentially, I'm moving my geometry to match that design. Then this right here, just kind of move that a little bit closer. That's looking good. Then from there, I'm going to grab these edges and bring up my modeling toolkit. And then I'm going to hit extrude. Now, I want to force your hand to make you practice with extrude more, but I will let you know there is a tool that if you start researching that is on this panel, it will actually make simple work out of this really quick. I'm not going to disclose it just yet, but if you're curious, you can watch ahead in the lectures where I introduce it. But the main thing is that I want you to be able to extrude efficiently and get used to moving around your object. So I went ahead and extrude. And what I want to do is I don't want to extrude every tiny bit that there is a change in roundness. That's because we want to only add in geometry when we need it. Because we can always add geometry in later. So I'm going to go right here, extrude again, and I'm holding down Shift. Yeah. No, I'll go back and straighten out. But here's the thing. So I'm setting up the bridge works for my tools to work better. So I'm setting up that transition, almost like, the quick sweeps, because what does my insert edge loop tool do? It starts mimicking the shape in between those right there. So that way, if I need to round this out later, I set up the main key points that I want to move around. So when I go right here and use my insert edge loop tool, we go right here and do relative distance. It's going to mimic that, so that way when I add these in later, I don't have to make that much of a change. It's just putting them back to a little bit more where they need to be, so it actually flows a little bit better. And then also, I didn't have to do a bunch of geometry for this curve. I want to hit the peaks and the valleys, and then start adding edges to smooth out between them. Because if you start adding in too much geometry at the beginning, it's almost like trying to draw a circle very slowly. When you actually draw a circle slowly, you get a lot of like bumpiness, a lot of little wiggles added into the line. Meanwhile, if you actually do a fast circle, you'll get a lot more of a fluid curvature. Same with right here. If you add a bunch of edges in at the beginning, it becomes harder to get that roundness. So again, we just want to work with that flow. All right, so got that. Go right here. I'll bring that out some more. And then we'll go right here, grab that edge. And honestly, I'm going to go all the way up to here. Because we're just trying to get that base shape. Once we have these defined, then we can go back and add those subtle adjustments. And then last but not least, let's go ahead and get this. And then one last extrude. At the end, let's go ahead and get the rest of the curvature. And let's see if we can go ahead and use a tool to help us with that. So I'm gonna go right here and kind of add these in as I go. But let's go ahead and add an edge loop right here. So when we have edge flow kind of in edges and directions and shape kind of defined, like how I kind of like, space through it. And if you've ever like did any research on animation, you have keyframes, which is the main pose, and then you have in-betweens, which gets you from those key poses to the next one. So it's like the ones of where you steadily are moving. So I set up the main key details, which is going from like the top of that peak down to the valley of that handle. And now I'm just trying to ease that transition. Well, we do have a tool that if we set up that direction nicely, it will try to observe that and make those adjustments for us. And that is going to be with this edge selected. I'm going to hold down Shift, right click, and edit edge flow. And we'll move that to better fit with the rest of my geometry. Now, is it a miracle worker? No. The more that you give it to work with, the better it can do its job. This is great, especially when you're working on cars, because cars have nice curvature and nice detail, and just an edge being slightly off can cause a ripple in your car door, cause a ripple in your fender, stuff like that. That looks weird when you go to render it. Edge flow is king with that right there. It looks at your defined, and then it goes and moves those little ripples back to the places that they need to be. So that is one tool. Actually, we've already shown two different tools that you can use. So let's go right here and try to use this again. And I'll go ahead, put edge loop right there, and let's see if we can have edge flow work for us. So let's go right here. So nope, it just kind of went into the center, so we need to define that more. So I'm gonna go right here, move that down. So now, when we go right here and click this and this. Now I'm gonna hold down Shift, right click, and see if this works. There we go. So we defined it more. It got close. So all we need to do is just kind of move that right there. And we can use this to our advantage. Now I do want this to be nicely evenly spaced. So I just want to make sure that these edges are evenly spaced as well too. Go right here, fix this handle. I actually probably want this to come down lower, because that is actually going to be smaller. And then let's go right here, cut this, and one right there. Got that. Now let's go ahead and hit that with the edge flow. So right there. See, I got close. Again, if it gets you close, that doesn't mean that the tool's broken or it's not working. These are not miracle tools. They can do a lot for us, but us as artists need to go back and fix it the rest of the way. But that's looking good. So with that right there, I'm gonna actually hit these with a few more edge flow, just so that we can smooth this out. That's looking good. All right, there we go. All right, I like the look of that. My skew is not working. It won't skew smaller. That's something that we're definitely going to have to see. So if you can take a screenshot of that and post it in the Discord, we can take a look. Now let's go right here and let's go back to our image, because remember, we're still trying to model this. And one of the things I'm seeing is that there is a circle there. There is a hole. So let's go ahead and add that hole in. Now, before I do that, what should I do? Yep, delete history and save. So we're going to go right here, file save as. And then what I want to do is we need add one more edge right here. So I'm going to actually add an edge about where this is going to be. So I'm going to go right here, add that in. So that way I can take these 4 faces right here, and I'm going to extrude them in. Frame. I'm going to make them smaller. Put it about where that hole goes. Now, we've already kind of showed it, but we got this wonky shape, and we need to make a nice round hole. All right. And back in the day, what we would have to do is draw a circle, follow that circle, and trace that circle. But a few FIs ago, I decided to add a functionality where I can grab those faces, go right here, and circleize them. That way we can get a nice, clean circle. And I'll move some of these vertexes so they kind of are not on top of each other. But we got these nice, clean circle. And how do I make a hole? Just delete. Yep. So yep, to make the hole, we just need to go right there and delete. Now I'm going to turn these a little bit more so that their edges are not being twisted. And what I'm talking about is twisted is that when we have an edge, we want it to travel the least amount of distance to its next vert. So if I have it like twisted like that, that can cause some issues. That can cause some display issues that don't look that great. So I want to just kind of grab these and turn them so that way each edge is probably traveling its shortest distance. And with that, I think that is looking good right there. So that's my overall shape. So at this point, I would say for the most part, I am good to add thickness. Once I'm happy with everything, I'm going to go ahead and make sure that I just add that thickness in. To add thickness, all we need to do is first, we may want to delete history. And since we're also doing a big change, right before a big change, it's always a good habit to make a save. And once we make a save, to add thickness, all we're doing is extruding the entire object. So with the entire object selected, we hold down Shift right click and hit extrude. And then we just pull out the thickness that we want. So if we go right here, we want to make sure that we're double checking this. So it's about yay thick. So we're just getting it yay tall. And then this just needs to go more of that. All right, but we're still missing something. What else are we missing? The handle. So same logic that we had with the sphere. So if we were trying to build a handle, well, we want to mimic the curvature of the sphere. Well, we have something that's already there that is in the same shape as that handle, the wrapping. But when we have wrapping there, does it no longer have the handle underneath? The handle's still there. All right. So in this case, extract would not work, where we would actually just take that handle and extract it into its new piece, because we would just rip a chunk out of it. Not that great. So instead, let's go ahead and select the edges. And if you notice that I made that extra edge that I needed for that hole, I put it right where the end of that handle is. But with that, I'm going to select all the faces that make up that handle. And instead of going right here and hitting extract, I'm going to go right here and hit duplicate. So shift right click, instead of extract faces, we have duplicate face. And now it's its own piece. So I can go right here, move it off to the side. And I missed the face, so I'm gonna undo that. Duplicate face. And now I have this right here. But with this, I want to go ahead and work on it. But right now, I want to keep it thin because I want whatever detail I add to it to be added to both sides. But right now, there's an issue where it's kind of right on top of the other object. They are doing something that we refer to on Wednesday as Z fighting. It's depth fighting. It's trying to figure out which object to display. They're inhabiting the same spot, so mine is just wigging out on what to show. So what we can do is we look at the top of our viewport. There is this right here, this little icon. This is called isolate selection. This will hide everything except for what is selected. Now that I showed you that icon, never hit it again. Control 1. Control 1. Control 1. Now, I'll make sure that my image is selected right here. So I got both my image and my handle. And this is the outliner. So I selected my handle and also the image. Reason for that is I just kind of want to look at it because we're going to go ahead and cut in some ridges. And to do that, I'm going to go right here. I'm going to go to multi-cuts. And with multi-cut there, I'm just going to drag through my object a few times. Now, I want to be careful not to cause it to have like n-gons, but 3 edges will allow me to go right here and that little relief. 3 edges right here. And like I said, just that little bit of detail makes it look a little bit more believable. Now, probably not going to go too crazy with this. But what we're trying to do is make it look like it has that look of a wrap around it. Oh, that's too much. And we'll do like 4 or 5 more of these. Maybe even use this to our advantage right there. But really, we're just trying to make it look like it has that wrapped on look. Work our way down. And this is why we're keeping it like so. So we get something like that. Now, this wrap is looking a little bit too blocky around here. So let's go ahead and round out these edges before we extrude this out. And to do that, I want to grab these corner ones. Now we're going to introduce a tool that we're going to really use a lot of next week, not next week, week 3, because it's used for a specific purpose called edge quality. But we're going to use it for another purpose, which is to kind of round out these edges. And that's where we're going to go right here with those edges on the corner. And again, I'm double clicking on this, holding down shift, double clicking the edges. And then I'm going to go right here to my modeling toolkit, bevel. And this will allow me to spread these out a little bit right here. And then add segments to round it out. So fraction, we'll spread out the edges. Segments will add more edges along it. I would not go really higher than 2. And then from there, I think we're good to extrude this out. So I'm going to take this right here. With it selected, I'm going to hit extrude. And then pull out on the z-axis, because since I'm doing that along the z-axis, it is going to pull them out all individually. Now we do have to watch out. We are getting a little bit of clipping right there. Just be careful. Kind of fix that by selecting those edges. That's actually a great tool to use right here, which is with those edges selected that are overlapping. Another tool that we can use is shift right click, slide edge. And then I can middle mouse click and drag and pull them away. Slide edge. Get them off of each other. Now, as we're sliding edges, we can tell it to stop snapping, just so that it stops yanking around. Yeah. Get these kind of off of each other. That's looking good. And then from there, I would probably bevel that edge. Double click that edge right there, hit bevel, just so that we get that roundness back. And this is where what we get. Now with that right there, we're getting some shading issues. And that's because if you learned anything from Art 1 or Art 2, we can control how an object looks by playing around with highlights and shadows, right? Well, Maya does the same thing. We can actually make this look rounder or harder depending on how we affect the shading on it. But the thing is that as we model, Maya doesn't know what we're going for, so it tries to make the best decision. So we end up with some stuff that looks a little bit too hard, some stuff that looks a little bit too soft. So we need to recorrect the shading. So I'm going to hold down Shift right click with this selected in object mode. And then I'm going to go right here to soften, harden edge and soften, harden. And what it's going to do is look at my angles. And for the angles that are harsher, it's going to try to pull them out. Now right here, it does look like we're kind of clipping through our, whatchamacallit. So what I'm going to do is actually grab some of these areas. And this is where, yep, I think I heard somebody say B. Yep, yep. And then just kind of pull this out. So I'm going to hold down Shift right, B as in boy, middle mouse click and drag. Just kind of pull that out right there, just so that I can kind of get off that surface. But from there, we have our Sokkas Club. So I'll probably, because I like doing this one a lot more than I did the other Sokkas Club that I'm not probably post on Discord, so I'm not probably use this one instead. But the whole notion of this right here is I can, in a bubble, show you tools all day, but until we actually start modeling real objects and start talking about strategies, you won't be able to really start practicing this right here, because not a lot of these concepts are easy to get and they don't organically happen. You have to watch other artists make objects so you can get an idea of how you can go from one object to multiple objects that have detail. Before we even started this club, did anybody have any idea how you would go about making this? You were, start with a sphere, and then when it came to your handle, what were you gonna do? Probably start with a cube, start extruding that out, stuff like that. I can't stress this enough. Watch people model, ask questions, look at other instructors, because you probably asked Wade how to do this. He'll probably have a completely different method. If you ask Erica how to do this, she probably has a completely different method right here. And the important thing is that some of these would make, some of my steps that I told you about may make sense to you. Some other steps from other instructors may make more sense. And it's important that you observe all of that. And with that, let's go ahead and take our last lecture activity and then talk about professionalism and how we're going to build on what we learned from lecture 1 and 2. So first, I'm going to go ahead and go into wire view, quad view, and I'm going to bring all my stuff back. And what I want to do is I'm going to hit Alt 5, Alt 5, Alt 5, Alt 5, and make sure that we're lined up in all our views. It's always wonky how it like draws all those. All right. Once we're lined up in all our views and we have wireframe shaded in all our views, I'm going to go right here, take a screenshot of the entire thing, save, and then we're going to make sure that we save it in our week lecture 3. I'm going to select this. I'm going to name this crop. And if you do this, you have one of your 5 props that you can use. What's up? You can keep the image up if you want. Either or, it's perfectly fine. But now, let's talk about how we want to do professionalism. So, we started off talking about professionalism on Wednesday, which is, at this point, just making sure that you have your history deleted, your pivot centered, and your transforms frozen, and they're on a layer. But each week, we're going to build on that, which is now that we're making our own objects, we have to organize them. So, do that first. Let's go right here. I'm going to select all my objects. I'm going to hit it with a center pivot, delete history, freeze transforms. Now I'll do that multiple times. But next, we need to organize and name all our objects. Anything that we create needs to be organized and named. And to do that, we do that inside of the outliner. So if I go right here, click on this box, that will pop open the outliner. Inside there, we get a couple different objects. Some of these are by default. So these right here, all these cameras, those are default. We leave those alone. Everything that's underneath these default sets, we leave those alone as well too. But everything that is sandwiched in the middle, that's stuff that we created and we have to organize it. So first, if we're done modeling an object, we no longer need its image. We can go ahead and delete that reference image and delete its layer. Next, we need to organize it. So to organize our object, we want to be able to have this be represented as one prop, but also at the same time, keep it in separate pieces. And this is where people make mistakes, which is what they'll do is select all these objects, go to mesh, hit combine, make it one object, and call it a day. If you do that, you will completely flunk one section of our grading, which is everything in separate pieces. Because now, in Maya's eyes, this is all one piece, which means when we go to UV it or texture and all that stuff right there, our life is going to be harder because a lot of our tools that uses separate objects will no longer work. Instead, we want something that allows us to have our cake and eat it too, which is treat this as one object, but keep everything separate. And that's where we bring up something called grouping. I'm going to go ahead and select this. And we can go right here to edit, group. Edit, group. The best way to think about grouping is think of it as a cardboard box. With a cardboard box, we can put a whole bunch of random stuff in it. And if we need to move it, we can pick up the cardboard box and move it to wherever we need to be. It's treated as one. But we can still reach into that box and grab out the individual pieces. This is the same concept. So I'm going to go right here and group it. Now, it did group it within another group. As we model, you will see that it will actually create groups as we go, because especially if we rip stuff off of existing objects, that's how it processes it. So if we need to move anything around in our outliner, in this case, I want this group outside of this group. What I can do is, with it selected, I can middle mouse, click and drag it out. As I do it, we will see it bounce between one line and two lines. One line means I will put it in between those two objects. So pretty much put it in a different order. If I put two lines into that, then essentially I will do something called parenting, P-A-R-E-N-T, which is essentially now this object will control my Sokkas Club. We do not want to parent anything. So instead we want to do one line, and now it's outside of this. And then we can go right here and remove that. Next, bare minimum, we need to have this into one main group. All the pieces are inside this one main group. And like I said, this group will allow me to move this around, scale it, which how many people did their diorama already? How many people like tried to make multiples of like their snowman and their trees? All right. And you probably noticed you select all your objects and you can like move them around as you duplicate them. But what happened when you try to grab multiple objects and scale them at the same time? Yeah, it individually scales them. All right. So the reason for that is because realize that when you select multiple objects, they all have their own pivot. If we need to scale this multiple objects down as one, we have to group them first, because grouping forces them to have one pivot. So grouping is a way to get around that. So if you actually, going back to your snowman, if you grouped all the pieces of your snowman and then scaled the group, you would not run into that problem. Just kind of let you know. Like I said, it's easier to explain the solution once you notice that there was a problem. So with that, we can scale, we can move, we can rotate all we want. But now we need to name this. And for our naming, we're going to double click on the group and name it Sokkas Club. But also every one of our objects right here need to be named. Now, this isn't too bad. You can go individually piece by piece and say, hey, Sokkas Club sphere, Sokkas Club handle, Sokkas Club grip. Not a bad problem. What happens when you get into certain objects that have like, 20, 30, 40 different pieces? So in that case, when you get further on the degree program, you want to be a little bit more specific how you name stuff. But for right now, we just want to get you in the habit of naming your objects, because you can't have any default naming. we look at these objects and how they say polysurface 1, 2, and 3, that's default naming. If you leave it like that, you'll lose points. You have to name them. And a quick way to name them is, if we look at the top of all these different icons right here, what's typically next to these render clackers, the thing that they go action and drop it and make that clacking sound, well, we will see what looks like a crosshair. That crosshair is a drop-down menu. Inside that drop-down menu is rename. Inside of here, I can select a whole bunch of objects and go Sokkas Club Part and hit enter. And we'll name it Sokkas Club Part 1, Part 2, Part 3. Now, obviously, there's not that many objects, but this is more for students who have something like the coffin. Coffin has probably about like 15, 20 different pieces right there, especially when you get into the handle. The handle is probably like 4 or 5 different pieces by itself, and you're going to duplicate that multiple times. So this is a way to get around that, so that way you're not ripping out your hair. Later on, you're going to be a little bit more specific with their naming, but baby steps. So with that, we have this in the main group, got it named. With that group selected, we want to go right here and create a layer. Create layer. And we're going to name this probably prop 1 layer. And then the last thing that we want to do is go ahead and hit this with another center pivot, delete history, freeze and transform. You never want to forget that. You can hit that multiple times, just in case you may have accidentally added some transforms, added some history. You can hit that multiple times. There's nothing wrong with doing it. You're never going to overdo it. And then from there, let's go ahead and save this. So Sokkas Club, and I'll just name this Professionalism or Prof Done. So that way I know what it is. And the reason for that is because you're going to want to take this in stages.